the war that changed everything. By the time the calendar flipped to 1812, the United States was still a young country, barely 3 decades old, yet already tangled in problems far bigger than itself. From shaky alliances to angry neighbors, in a former motherland that hadn't quite let go, tensions were boiling. That boiling point, the War of 1812. You might ask, why would the US fight the biggest empire in the world again, just 30 years after winning independence? Well, the answer is complicated, annoying, and DS boring. But this war is also the forgotten turning point of early America. Okay, here's a quick review. After the American Revolution, Britain and America were not chumps. Britain remained the dominant global power, and America was still stuck in many ways. It was economically dependent on Britain, and had only a tiny navy and a small army. Plus, there was the issue of where exactly the border with Canada was. So you can imagine how this played out. Americans had visions of manifest destiny, meaning they wanted to expand across the continent. But Britain was in the way. Then there was the issue of impressment. It's basically kidnapping sailors from American ships and forcing them into the Royal Navy. And finally, there was the issue of Native Americans. Britain supplied Native Americans with guns and encouraged them to keep resisting U.S. expansion, which America understandably saw as sabotage. All of this could have been avoided if America was willing to be a good little subject and stay in the British Empire. But nope, they rebelled. So now Britain has every reason to want to punish those silly Americans. Get it, you don't like it, but that doesn't mean we won't. And now we return to our regularly scheduled programming. Again, let's go back a little. After the American Revolution, things didn't really cool down between the US and Britain. Imagine getting a divorce. Your ex keeps showing up to your house parties. Britain, still at war with Napoleon in Europe, needed sailors. So what did they do? They kidnapped American sailors right off their ships and forced them to serve in the British Navy. This was called impressment, and it made Americans furious. Meanwhile, Britain kept supplying Native American tribes in the Northwest with weapons to slow down U.S. expansion. America saw it as sabotage. It wasn't just about national pride, it was also about money, territory, and control. The war begins, but America wasn't tea-ready. Congress declared war in June 1812. President James Madison wasn't exactly thrilled about it. But there was immense pressure from the war hawks in Congress, mostly young. Southern and Western politicians who wanted to defend American honor and maybe grab Canada too. The Canada disaster, one of the boldest early American ideas, was to invade Canada, then a British colony. We'll be greeted as liberators, they said. They weren't. In fact, the invasion went terribly. Poorly trained American troops were driven back in a series of embarrassing defeats. In one battle, American General William Hull surrendered without even fighting. The British and their Native American allies, including the legendary Shawnee Chief Tecumseh, defended Canada fiercely. Naval pride and small victories. Despite being outnumbered, the U.S. Navy scored some surprising victories at sea. The USS Constitution, nicknamed Old Ironsides, defeated the British ship HMS Guerriere. American privateers harassed British merchant ships all over the Atlantic. On the Great Lakes, American forces won the Battle of Lake Erie, securing the Northwest. One American naval commander, Oliver Hazard Perry, sent a famous message: "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." The British burned Washington in 1814. Britain turned its full attention to America. Napoleon had been defeated in Europe, so now the British sent thousands of soldiers to North America. In August 1814, British troops marched into Washington, D.C., and burned the White House, the Capitol, and other federal buildings. President Madison and his wife Dolly barely escaped. Before fleeing, Dolly saved a portrait of George Washington. The Star-Spangled Banner is born later that year. The British attacked Fort McHenry in Baltimore. A lawyer named Francis Scott Key watched the battle from a ship and was shocked to see the American flag still flying after a night of heavy bombardment. Inspired, he wrote a poem that became the Star-Spangled Banner. Now, the U.S. national anthem, The War Ends. With a whimper by late 1814, both sides were tired of fighting. Peace talks began in Ghent, Belgium, and on December 24, 1814, the Treaty of Ghent was signed. It It ended the war, but didn't he really solve any of the issues that started it, like impressment or British interference with Native Americans? But here's the twist, because news traveled slowly. The biggest and most famous battle of the war happened after the treaty was signed. The Battle of New Orleans in January 1815. General Andrew Jackson led a ragtag army of soldiers, free black men, Native Americans, and even pirates to defend New Orleans against a massive British invasion. Despite being outnumbered, Jackson crushed the British. Over 2,000 British troops were killed or wounded. Americans lost fewer than 100. It was a huge morale booster and made Jackson a national hero, even though the war was technically already over. What did the war actually change? On paper, not much. No territory changed hands. No major political reforms came out of it. But symbolically, it meant everything. America had stood up to Britain again and survived. It gave the country a newfound sense of confidence and identity. People stopped saying the United States are and started saying the United States is. It was a subtle but important shift. Aftermath. What came next? The War of 1812 helped trigger several trends. The rise of American manufacturing, because British trade was cut off. The death of the Federalist Party, which had opposed the war. The era of good feelings. A short period of political unity and optimism. The emergence of Andrew Jackson, who would eventually become the 7th U.S. president. Why it's still boring. The War of 1812 gets overshadowed by the Revolution and the Civil War. Textbooks breeze through it, made teachers yawn when explaining it. But the truth is, it secured America's independence for good. It forced the country to grow up militarily and economically. It gave us national symbols like the anthem and Old Ironsides. So yeah, it's boring, but it changed everything. Do you think you'd have fought in the War of 1812? Share your thoughts below. If you liked this video, check out another short on the American Revolution. Thanks for watching. See you next time.